to the mission and collaboration and synergies across the other EU missions. The target audience are the Green Deal projects themselves, people from the European Commission services and their agencies who are interested in supporting the Green Deal project's impact in terms of this mission, and people interested in the EU missions and Green Deal projects more generally. So I believe that we actually have online people not just from Europe, but from around the world, which is brilliant. And thank you so much for joining. If we can go to the next slide, Beatrice. What I thought it would be nice to do just at the start is to actually get a better idea who is actually online. So if you could actually go to Mentimeter, and if you know how to use this, go to Mentimeter. Beatrice, actually, I'm looking at the slide that you've got up on the screen, and it's not the slide I would expect. The slide I would expect would have had the Mentimeter email, web address and the Mentimeter account number that people need to enter. Have you got that?
Taking just 1 second.
If it's not possible, we will move on, Beatrice.
Maybe just move on to the next one, because
okay,
let's trying to connect, but
okay, let's move on to the next slide. We can come back to it. It would be nice to know. Guido's got an idea. Guido.
An idea, maybe. I mean, this Menti was about asking people where they are from, right?
Yes.
Maybe everybody can type it simply in the chat.
Yes, very good idea, Guido. Let's do that. Can you type in the chat whether you're from the European Commission, the Green Deal projects, from somewhere else in Europe or elsewhere around the world? Okay, Hamna actually has now given us the code for Menti in the chat. Mentimeter itself is just Menti, MENTI.com. So if you open your browser and put in menti.com, and then once you're there, simply enter the code 59486912. I'll repeat that.
I've put the correct link directly to the poll in the chat also.
Brilliant. I cannot. Well done, Sophie. Thank you so much. So yes, if you scroll up the chat, you'll find Sophie Berger's link to Menti. If you click on that, and that takes you either directly to the poll, or you'll need to enter the code, which is just above Sophie's link. And then once you're there, if you can simply enter whichever sort of person you are. Beatrice, is it possible to share that poll on screen so that we can see it?
Yes, Hamna, I'm going to stop sharing. Can you share your screen where you can visualize the results?
Yep, sure.
Thank you, Hamna.
Can you guys?
Yes, thank you. That's brilliant. Okay. Keep going, everyone. Anyone who's not entered yet. I'll give you just another minute. I mean, as it stands, it's very much what we hoped for, really. There's a predominance of people from the Green Deal research projects. We have a good small representation from the European Commission, and it's brilliant to see others of you from research, policy and implementation, both from Europe and across the globe. So thank you very much for joining. I suggest we move on, Beatrice, if you want to share your slides again now. Can you put it in presentation mode, please?
It's not. Oh.
It's still showing the
Yeah.
You need to click on the 3 dots and get rid of presenters mode. Thank you. And move to the next slide.
Yeah.
Okay, so just a few housekeeping rules before we really get going. The webinar is being recorded. I trust that is okay with you all, and we will share it with you afterwards and more widely. If you can keep your microphone muted, that's very helpful. Thanks for being so disciplined at the moment, and best if you have your camera turned off. We've just got the panel members with their cameras on. Use the chat as you already are to comment and to ask questions. I've got somebody who's keeping track of those comments and questions, and they will bring them to my attention if there are particularly relevant comments and questions for panel members, and we can stop at various points in the webinar to have a discussion. If you've got any technical issues at all, just message us in the chat. We are monitoring it, or email us at support@greendealprojects.eu, and we'll get back to you and try and sort you out. Okay, so next slide. In terms of the agenda, we've got me and the introduction, and then I'm going to pass it over to Sophie Berger, who's here from DG RTD, representing the European Commission as a representative of the mission on adaptation to climate change. She'll talk about the EU mission and introduce it to you. We've then got Elena Lopez-Gunn, who is from iCatalyst. She's actually a member of the European Scientific Advisory Board on Climate Change. She's a lead author from the IPCC 6th Assessment Report of Chapter 4 on water, and also an expert member of the Spanish Assembly in relation to climate. She'll be talking about building the bridges between science and implementation. How do we ensure that science has an impact? And then we move on to Guido Schmidt from Resilience. This is one of the first 4 mission projects. And he'll be talking about the Green Deal projects, their objectives and contributions to the EU mission on adaptation to climate change. And then we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers. I do have a guiding question there for you. if you need it. You may not do. You may all be quite vocal. It will be interesting to see. And then finally, we've got Michael Ploder from Ioannium, who coordinates TRAMI. TRAMI is a project looking to join up discussion synergies across all of the 5 EU missions. And he'll be talking about the opportunities of collaboration and synergies for the Green Deal projects regarding climate adaptation across the missions. And then we'll have another guiding question and then just a few closing words from me. So plenty of opportunity for you to contribute if you wish at particular points. Okay, so next slide, Beatrice, please. So Sophie, if I can hand over to you.
Okay, so thank you very much. Yeah, so as you said, I'm coming from DG Research and Innovation, and together with some colleague from the DG Climate Action, we are part of the Secretariat running the mission on climate adaptation. Can you perhaps move on to the next slide? And the next one as well. And so here I'm going to talk to you a little bit to introduce you the mission on adaptation. But first, why do we need a mission on adaptation? Well, I guess it doesn't come as a surprise to many people that the world is getting warmer, and this warming of 1.1 degrees so far has consequences, and it means for Europe and for other regions in the world more extreme, more frequent and more intense extreme heat and rainfall, droughts in dry regions, more wildfires, changing oceans such as sea level rise and changing chemistry and everything. And while a lot of the focus at the moment is on mitigation, meaning reducing greenhouse gases emission, adaptation isn't really an option. We have to adapt to a warmer world. And even though there has been some progress so far in terms of adaptation, as it was online in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports, this isn't enough. So we really need to do something. And so can you perhaps move on to the next slide? And this is why also the environment and the climate question is very much one of the priorities of the EU Commission at the moment. And that's why in 2019, the European Green Deal was launched. And the idea with the Green Deal is that it's a package of policies going in one direction, putting the environment at the forefront of the action of the EU. And the idea with the Green Deal is to have the EU, the continent climate neutral by 2050, but also climate resilience. And while, as I said, a lot focuses on mitigation, resilience is also at the core of the European Green Deal. And then in 2021, the EU released its new adaptation strategy. And it lays out a vision on how the EU should adapt to the unavoidable impact of climate change. And here I'd like to highlight that the EU adaptation strategy has 4 really central dimensions. The first one is that we need smarter adaptation. What does it mean, smarter adaptation? It means adaptation that is really based on the latest data and on the latest knowledge. So really reflecting what's the science that is already out there. Then we also need more systemic adaptations, meaning working across sectors, across silos, because climate change is really impacting so many different sectors, so many different aspects of our life that we cannot work separately. We need a systemic approach to properly tackle climate change. And then it also needs to be faster, because as I said earlier, there has been some progress in terms of adaptation, but we are nowhere near where we need to be. And then there is the 4th dimension that is laid out in the adaptation strategy, which is stepping up international action. But this is less relevant for the mission. And really, so we've got this adaptation strategy. And then in 2021 was also launched the EU mission on adaptation to climate change. And this mission is really one of the main implementation mechanisms for the EU strategy on adaptation. And it really focused on the first 3 aspects, which are smarter, more systemic, and faster adaptation. I'd also like to point out that the Horizon Europe calls, some of them are also targeting the international actions. Next slide, please. And so this is leading us to the mission on adaptation, more strictly speaking. And the overarching goal of the mission on adaptation is to support at least 150 European regions and local authorities to become climate resilient by 2030. So unlike the adaptation strategy and the Green Deal, which are looking at 2050, here we're talking about 2030. So it's basically tomorrow. So it's quite ambitious. Yet you can see that 150, it's still like, it's ambitious, yet it's somehow, it's narrowly defined, and so it's still achievable. And to do that, we have 3 sub-objectives targeting different people and increasingly ambitious. And so the first objective of the mission is really to prepare Europe for climate disruptions. And this is trying to target everyone, the citizens, all regions, all local authorities, communities. And what does it mean, prepare Europe for climate disruption? It means, first of all, better understanding the risk that we are going to face and the solutions that are there. Then we want to work with a subset of at least 150 local authorities and regions, and with them, really a coalition of the willing. We want to accelerate the transition to a resilient future. What does it mean, accelerate? It means also designing a pathway towards climate resilience, start implementing it, but it also means testing on the ground solutions that are already there or that have been developed on the lab. This is really a key difference with other Horizon Europe calls or Horizon 2020, is that this mission it's not about creating new knowledge. It's about taking what's already out there and really apply it on the ground. It's really, we have a huge challenge, and it's really putting science on the side of the solution. And then comes the final part of the pyramid, which is working with even smaller subsets, and with and to build 75 deep demonstration where we're really upscaling the solution that are already working, and we build really in-depth resilience. And so one of the common approach of the mission is also that we are, as you can see, we are trying to work really closely with the local authorities and the region. So, and the reason why we want to do that is because adaptation needs to be place-based. Everyone is going to be impacted by climate change, but everyone is going to be impacted in different ways. And also the solutions really need to be tailored to the local context. And that's why also the solutions need to be very inclusive, and the citizens and all the stakeholders need to be included in the solution. So this is really also at the core of the mission. And it needs to be systemic and work across silos, a little bit like what was online on the adaptation strategy. Can you move on to the next slide? Another way to look at it, because we've got those 3 objectives, and yeah, it's very conceptual, but not very down to earth. So another way in the mission implementation that we've thought to focus on was to focus on 10 key innovation areas. Of those, we have 6 key community systems, which are really systems that are going to be that meet basic needs for the human societies, and that increasingly impacted by climate change. And those systems are critical infrastructure, health and well-being, land use and food system, water management, and then all of those are linked to ecosystem and nature-based solution. And then on top of that comes a 6th system, which is the local economic system, which is underpinning the rest. But we also believe that focusing on those systems is not enough. We also need 4 key conditions that will enable to reach climate resilience. And those conditions are knowledge and data. We need to know what's going to happen, and we need to know the solution. But we also need to have the proper political structure and governance in place to make the change and take the measures that are necessary. We also need engagements from citizens and stakeholders. And then the 3rd enabling condition is that we need finance and resources to fund the measure. And finally, we need to know more about behavioral change, and because the change that will be required of us to truly reach climate resilience requires to change behavior. So this is really something not to be overlooked. Next slide, please. And so here, because most of you are coming, I guess, from the research community, I wanted to briefly present you the calls related to the mission from the Horizon Europe. At the moment, we mostly have money to a bit more than 350 50 million euros for 3 years. And the idea to really act toward the objective of the mission is that the calls are either trying to target one specific objective of the pyramid on the left, or one of the key innovation area from the little square on the right-hand side. And because all the regions are not necessarily at the same level in terms of climate change and climate readiness, we are trying to target at the same time different levels of the pyramid. And so, for instance, in the 2021 call, for which the grants are under preparation and should start in early 2023, we have a call that was about making setting up a climate risk assessment framework, so really targeting the base layer of the pyramid. But you can see also that we have calls targeting enabling conditions. And for instance, we had a specific call on citizens' engagement, and then also calls on resilience pathway, which is the accelerate middle layer of the pyramid, and then large-scale demonstrator. And as we move on to the 2022 call and the 2023 call, you can see that we're increasingly going towards the upper part of the pyramid. And so that's why, for instance, in the 2022 calls, which are under evaluation, it's either on enabling condition and key system or on developing and testing solution. We also had a call on demonstration, but unfortunately we had no applicants. And in the 2023 call, which might be interesting for you, because they are going to be published in December and going to open on the 10th of January. This one is really very much about testing and demonstrating transformative solution for 5 of the key systems outlined on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. And so a way to look at how the mission will work is that we want it to be something that really goes beyond research and innovation, because we need to, as I said, like, it needs to be experimented underground, it needs to be concrete, it needs to be really accelerating. And so on the right-hand side, left-hand side, we've got the European Commission and the research and innovation project, but also some projects from LIFE and some projects from Interreg. And also, when I say Horizon project, I mean the mission project, but also others that could work that are relevant for the mission on adaptation. And those ones are helping us to work towards our objectives. And there will be a kind of like coordination, a little bit like, you know, a coordinator of a project is going to coordinate between the different work packages of a project. Here we've got a mission implementation platform that will act as a meta, if I might say so, like meta coordinator, and trying to coordinate between the project, which are trying to tackle different issues related to the mission on adaptation. But the mission implementation platform will also go beyond that, because it will also act as the contact point between the missions projects on the left-hand side and the regions and local authorities, which we want to be ready to face climate change. And so at the same time, we've been trying to engage with them. And so we've opened a charter for them to sign, and by signing that they commit to act on adaptation to climate change. And on the right-hand side of this slide, you can see a map with all the regions that have so far expressed interest in joining the mission. And so the mission implementation platform will try to connect also and favor, if the research project have to work with region, they will try to favor those regions. And they will also offer technical support to those regions. And can we move on to the next slide? And so this is a little bit like the idea of the missions, and I just want to briefly finish with the next steps. So as I said, in terms of calls, in December, we're going to publish the 2023 calls, which are going to open on the 10th of January, and there will be early in January the info days about those calls if you're interested. And then on the side of the regions, if you know regions, European regions that might be interested in joining the mission, you should let them know that the charter is going to close, the application for charter is going to close on the 25th of November and will be announced, the third batch of signatory will be announced soon after that. And then it's really in the new year that we're going to pick up speed, because the first projects are going to start, and also apart from the grinding call, but really the first labeled as mission calls. And we are going to launch the mission implementation platform.
Brilliant. Sophie, is that your final slide?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Sophie. So this is an brief opportunity to ask Sophie any questions about her presentation, about the mission on adaptation to climate change, or indeed about the Green Deal projects and the calls that Sophie has mentioned. So yes, so we have a question from Clémence Gracier from Transformer. Do you know when will be the deadline for the 2023 mission calls?
I know that it's open several months. Like that, I don't know, but let me check and come back to you. But I know that the last call, the 2022 call, it was open in May to close in September. So let me check and I will come back to you.
Okay. Somebody has their hand up. I can't see who it is. Has somebody got their hand up and wants to ask a question?
Yeah, it's me. Hi, I'm Ricardo from Uppsala University. I wanted to ask, why is there essentially the whole of France regions in France seems to have joined the mission, while none like in Germany? Like, why is there such a big geographical distribution to it?
Can we perhaps go back to the map?
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So, well, technically speaking, there are 3 signatories in Germany. It's just that also the territorial entities are so small that you don't see that on the map. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is also that we communicated about the mission through national contact point. As you can see, France is all covered. And I think it's because the national contact point that we had was very proactive in contacting the regions. And also because regions means different things in different countries. This is also sometimes an issue because in France, for instance, what they call regions has the competency to work on adaptation. So they felt really targeted, whereas in Germany, it's much more at the local level, which is harder for us at the EU level to reach them. But also, it depends on the national support. And so if you assume that there is already strong things put in place in Germany to act towards adaptation, then they don't necessarily feel like they have to join the mission. But for the rest, it's that's for me some elements of response, but it's hard to truly know what. But one of the power of this map is that we've been in calls with German representative, and as soon as you show this map, they were like, oh, Germany is not there, maybe we should try and do something. So I know that some regions in Germany were talking about joining the mission as well.
Brilliant. And actually also, there is still the opportunity for regions and local authorities to express their interest and to join the mission until the 25th of November. I'll repeat that in the last slide because obviously it would be great if more do, and I'm sure more will. But now, Sophie, can I take you back to the deadline for the 2023 mission calls, or shall we leave that and perhaps you can respond another way?
I've asked the colleague and I will answer in the chat. I think it's
brilliant. Okay, 2 more questions and then we'll have to move on. Stefka Demuzova, and apologies for my terrible pronunciation. Are any particular measures in place to tackle particular regions less involved so far? I think you've already sort of covered this, haven't you, Sophie?
So
they're concerned about Eastern and Southern Europe.
So one of the things that we've been trying to, when we made this map and we saw it, we tried to really engage regions and countries that were less represented. So we tried and reached out directly to them, but also more importantly, we want to really focus on the one who want to work with us, no matter their level. Like we want to have the one that are very advanced, but the one that are very late in the process of adaptation. But more importantly, we want to focus on the vulnerable regions, the one that are going to be mostly impacted by climate change with the least capacity to respond to it. And so with that in mind, there might be some way for us to proactively, through the project, try and engage those ones. This is what I can say, I guess, to partly answer your question. So yes, we're very aware of that, and we've been trying to reach out to the less represented countries and the most at risk.
Brilliant, Sophie. And just, can you reassure Rosa and Lucy that about cities and their ability to be members of the Charter?
Yes. So by regions and local authorities, we mean it needs to be a territorial entity that can sign the charter, that has the authority to act on climate adaptation, and so as long as it's we have some cities part of the mission.
Brilliant. Okay,
and
I think
also the call is going to close around the 20th of September 2023.
Okay, so yeah, so 20th of September 2023 for the close of the call that you were asking about. All right, let's move on, and I'm delighted to welcome Elena Elena Lopez-Gunn, and as I've said to you, she's a member of the European Scientific Advisory Board, IPCC Sixth Assessment Report lead author, and so it's brilliant that you're here, Elena, and I know that you want to say a few words about climate adaptation and the need, and then you'll focus on building bridges between science and implementation. So Elena.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you for the introduction. Just thank you for being here. I think it's great to see so many people attending, and particularly that, you know, the research in Europe is really thinking about adaptation. And from what I heard when we were preparing the session, that is projects from all sectors. I think that is actually even more important and more relevant. So just one quick question, Richard. I wanted to ask people listening to put their hand up if they're working directly on adaptation. So it's just to kind of gather how many people here. Okay.
So everybody put their hands up if you're involved in climate adaptation currently. I'll put my hand up.
I'll put mine up too.
So
okay.
How many people have we got with their hands up? Can somebody say? Can you see, Elena?
Yeah, I think I can.
19.
19.
Okay, good. It was
I
just,
imagine actually, Elena, that's an understatement. We've got about 71 people online, so I'm guessing more are.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah.
I mean, I guess in a way you are all working on adaptation, whether you know it or not. I think that was also part of my message, because in fact, all your knowledge is going to be needed for adaptation. So the index of the presentation I have is first I'm going to give a kind of complementary view to what Sophie just presented. I'm very briefly going to present the impacts, because this year is really important, because, you know, a number of, well, particularly the IPCC report came out, but also we've actually lived through the impacts of climate change in many of our countries. Then I'm going to focus on what the talk is really about, which is, you know, how can science support policy, but also how policymakers can really, you know, build bridges quickly towards science and building the evidence that we need for action. And then finally, this closing window of opportunity that we're hearing from the latest evidence on the impacts from climate change. Next. Okay, so just a kind of quick recap, which I think Sophie kind of explained very well what the mission is about, but I wanted to remind us why the missions were created in the first place. And just to say that is this idea that we have a North Star is guiding us to topics that we think are really particularly important above all research that we're doing. These are topics that we think are urgent. But however, as you see in my picture here, even with the North Star, you need to know how to find it. And that's why we created the missions. And it's this idea that we have a collective vision to act together in areas identified as particularly critical. And what have we learned, since the missions were actually designed and thought about, inspired by, by Mariana Mazzucato and the entrepreneurial state? First of all, we've lived through COVID-19. And I think the one takeaway that we can take about is the power when we act together as a union. We actually could see how something that would have taken a long time, and we knew that it would take a long time, like the development of a vaccine, we could actually develop much quicker because we acted together. Second, the geopolitical crisis that we are experiencing at the moment is putting particular pressure on staying the course on the Green Deal vision and targets, and we should not be blind about this. We're going to, there's a lot of pressure at the moment to somehow, go slower or even kind of slightly derail the vision that we have of, climate neutrality. And it's even more important that we stay the course and take this opportunity to speed up, mitigation, which is actually the most effective adaptation. But finally, because the climate impacts are already here, and I think we've seen it, first of all, in the report that was just published from the IPCC, but also, the work done by the JRC and the European Environment Agency, and in all our different countries. Therefore, we also know that the science of attribution is demonstrating that, we can now put the fingerprint of climate change into these impacts. And I think I've lost my slide, but I can, okay.
Beatrice, we've lost the slides. Are you there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
That's all right.
What happened?
Don't worry.
Just give me a second.
Yeah. So while Beatrice gets it, the next 3 slides is just a recap, and that's partly why I wanted to ask all of you that have worked directly on adaptation, because I just wanted to give you a very quick summary of what the latest report from the IPCC said in relation to Europe. For those of you that are not familiar, I recommend that you check chapter 15, which is the one that focuses on Europe. Or otherwise, if you come from the Mediterranean, there's a specific chapter also for the Mediterranean, but because the Mediterranean in particular is actually considered a hotspot in global terms. Okay, I can continue, otherwise I can project it on my screen.
No,
okay. No, okay.
I don't.
Okay,
yeah.
I'll wait. It's fine.
We can see the slide, Beatrice.
Okay,
so
I can see it
just
now.
put it on
Yes.
presentation view. And, yeah, brilliant.
It's perfect.
Thank you.
Okay. So just as a recap, this idea that we can act together, and adaptation, I think, merits this opportunity to act together, when we're facing a common threat. The fact that the geopolitical crisis is going to put even more pressure for us to stay the course and, really achieve this Green Deal vision, and that the impacts of climate change are already here, and therefore the urgency to act. Okay, next slide. Okay, so then just for, again, a recap that we had these 3 reports published this year. I'm going to just very briefly summarize now what came out for Europe in this report that came out in February. And of course, the synthesis report is running a little bit behind, but it's going to be coming out soon. Next slide. Okay, next. Okay, so this is just, a kind of reminder of the importance of remaining on course on the 1.5, and the threat if we actually go into the kind of more dire scenarios that at the moment we're heading towards, because this will actually impact our continent in terms, for example, of extreme heat and also of extreme rainfall. So this is reason enough to kind of act together and basically encourage our regions, and particularly as scientists, support our regions with our science, so they have the evidence that they need to act and to take decisions that sometimes are not going to be easy. Next. Okay, so as you can see here, the kind of, and from what I understand, a lot of your projects deal with the key innovation areas that Sophie was mentioning, like health or food or water or landscapes and ecosystems. All these are areas that are going to be impacted in one way or another by climate change. For example, how heat stress is going to be affecting our population. This is very linked to health and also how we live in our cities and whether we actually need to change the way our cities, the way we move, or for example, with nature-based solutions in our cities. Also, the fact that it will actually also impact on our habitats. What do we need to do in terms of research to understand better how our habitats are going to be impacted or how we can adapt and also adapt our habitats to these impacts. And at the same time, the fact that it would actually impact, for example, our food systems. Next. And then, as you can see here, European cities, where most of the population of Europe still lives, on middle-sized cities, and particularly important in this context. You can see here a graph that shows the kind of adaptation solutions that we could be adopting to help our cities adapt better. And this actually, I also want to make a plug here. There's also a parallel mission on cities that we should also kind of, in a way, extend our hand to, so that we can better integrate adaptation to mitigation and capture all the benefits from this integration of these two policies at the local level. But what is important here is that, and I think this is where all your projects can really, really help, is to really have better evidence on how these adaptation solutions, which are most effective when we're dealing with different scenarios on climate change, which are the most robust, and particularly which are the ones that also address the most vulnerable populations in our cities, for example. Next. So just to recap, these are terms that probably when your projects were not approved, I think this is after your projects probably started. Some of the terminology that is coming now. One is the limits to adaptation. We cannot pretend that, at one point we cannot adapt, because it's just the scenarios are just, almost too extreme. And this is also, in a way, reason for concern and for us to adapt faster, but also stay on the course in relation to mitigation. Also, the fact that bad decisions can be made is called maladaptation. And our science should also inform, when we're taking bad decisions in terms of adaptation in the long term. And also financial constraints. There's something called the adaptation finance gap. It's already a financial gap in terms of mitigation, but it's even more in the case of adaptation. So we should also build up the case, but we need bankable projects in relation to adaptation to, in a way, prevent damages for example, critical infrastructure or in our cities, or deaths from extreme events. Next. Okay, so how does this link to the mission? As you can see here, I think that Horizon Europe, and I put this kind of tab here, thinking, we have these adaptation arrows, and some, when I put in red for me, is when we're doing maladaptation, make sure that the measures we're taking, and then I put on the right, that these measures at the end, adaptation is incredibly local, which is why I think it's very important that the mission has focused on citizens, on communities, and on regions. So these are the actors that are going to be critical. So as scientists, we have to be engaging with these levels of administration, with our regions. We need to be in dialogue with them so that our results feed directly into the policy making that these regions and communities are doing in relation to the impacts from climate change. Next. Okay, next. Okay, so I'm now moving, one less. Yeah, okay, so I'm moving to the last part of the presentation, which is really about this idea of making science a bridge, making science the evidence that we need so that then policymakers can take, the best possible decisions when we're dealing with the impacts from climate change. So first of all, you have to think about, the findings of your research. How can they inform policy? Also, what gaps are you identifying where we don't have sufficient knowledge and we have to make, we have to gather additional evidence or maybe even methods that would get the right evidence. At the same time, what needs do our stakeholders have? What science do they need that can really support the decision making? These are critical questions that as scientists you should be asking yourselves in relation to policy. And of course, as we all know, you have to be doing it in consultation with the key stakeholders. You have to be talking to the farmers. You have to be talking to the fishermen. You have to be talking to the local mayors, or the local decision makers, so then you actually get to understand, what science will be most useful to them. But at the same time, you have to be aware that there are policy windows. There are times when these actors can act better than others, and in a way, be aware when is the best time, to give, to provide this science so that it can be most effective. At the same time, what are the messages? Sometimes as scientists, we have to really think of our language so it can be understandable, to different audiences. But again, which are your key audience? Who are your results relevant to? You have to be reflecting on this. And I know a lot of you probably are very aware of this, so this doesn't come as new. But this is something that we have to think even more because the urgency is there. And also how you're going to be communicating. And I think recently we've seen a lot of the research projects are really innovative in terms of the means we communicate. So it's not just reports, but we can do videos, we can do many ways of communicating our science. Then again, it is capable of engaging these audiences, that don't necessarily come from our world when we speak in kind of a way, sometimes with a lot of jargon that they don't necessarily comprehend. But also your position as a researcher, who are you when you go into the policy space? And you have to think that you can be an honest broker, which is basically, you give this very objective view. But sometimes you can also be a staunch advocate because you're concerned about what you're seeing from your research results. But at the same time, you have to be very aware of this positioning of yourself. You have to be reflecting yourself on your role as a scientist when you go into the policy arena and how you're engaging with these different audiences. Next. Okay, and then for the policymakers attending the talk today, you have to also be thinking, how you own the brief for the research. You have to help the scientists, in a way to understand how the research can be better tailored and how can it be better timed so that it can actually affect the policy windows. Reach out to them to tell them this window is coming up and that this kind of research will be particularly useful to you. For example, things like ex-ante impact assessments, or for example, evaluations of relevant legislation, strategies, policies, regulation. What kind of incentives do you need to understand better? For example, as Sophie mentioned, one of the key elements is, for example, looking at behavior. How can we have the best evidence on behavioral change to inform policy that, for example, could support difficult kind of policy measures that might be unpopular unless they're explained, backed by robust evidence. At the same time, you have to be thinking of these policy windows. For example, in a way, remember, for example, that when you're thinking of policy windows, there's on the one hand, of course, the global window, like, for example, the Paris Agreement. There's also the windows that we have in Europe with the EU adaptation strategy. But remember that the EU adaptation strategy is also making a lot of stress on national adaptation plans. And in many of our countries, that would also, kind of bear down at the regional level. So think of policy windows also in your region, not just at the national level. And the purposes of the research, how can you inform whatever policies are happening in your nearby environment? At the same time, and super important in the case of adaptation, because it's very, very local, you have to consult the key stakeholders. Very, very important that they understand, the relevance of the work you're doing, or you understand the relevance of the work they're doing in terms of establishing this dialogue. And in this sense, for example, be familiar or become familiar with, for example, the fact that the European climate law has got a whole article, Article 5, which looks at adaptation. And they are asking for scientific evidence in the article. So you have a legal, in a way, coverage for doing your scientific evidence, because that's actually what the climate law is actually asking from you as a scientist. But at the same time, think of the EU strategy on adaptation to climate change. And as Sophie was mentioning, there's a number of levers that they've identified about smarter adaptation, systemic adaptation, and the fast adaptation, because we're now entering a period of, observed climate impacts that under the current scenarios, because we're not really on the 1.5 track, means that we have to be even faster and even and considering now, as we know from science, that there are limits to this adaptation. So, and then finally, of course, the Paris Agreement, and just a reminder to some of you that, for example, like COP27, loss and damages and the goal of climate change adaptation is going to be very much one of the key topics that is going to be addressed. Next. Okay, and this is actually my final slide. And this is just the kind of working group 2 main conclusion. I've actually modified it a little bit, but it said European action. It says global action. But since we're in a European frame and we're thinking about our continent, I thought that this is really, really important to remember that the scientific evidence is unequivocal. And you should be part of adding to this evidence, because the next report, the IR7, is starting as we speak. And they will need your papers, your evidence, to make an even better case of why we have to move faster on adaptation. Climate change is a threat to human well-being, but also to the health of our planet. As we learn from COVID-19, this is really important that we are kind of bound together in this kind of one health. At the same time, any further delay in concerted European action will miss the brief, rapidly closing window to secure a livable future for all. And then, as I put here, this is one of the major findings from the working group 2, this idea of climate resilient development pathways. And in a way, what I was encouraging is for you to think that your research, your projects can really help the implementation of the mission in terms of staying all of our regions so that they can stay on course on this kind of virtuous path towards better resilient development, rather than this kind of vicious path that is kind of showing, making our regions, particularly some of them, very, very vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And with this, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elena. That was brilliant. If anyone has any questions for Elena, ask them in the chat. After Guido speaks, there'll be a chance for Guido and Elena to answer questions. So have a think right now about questions for Elena. We are running about 5 minutes behind the agenda. I'm fairly relaxed about it because we do have the question and answer session, so I can manage that. Be assured I will keep the webinar to time. Now we've got Guido. Guido Schmidt from the Resilience Project, which is a coordination and support action and one of the first mission projects. So again, we're enormously lucky to have Guido here, and he's going to be talking about the Green Deal project's objectives and their contributions to the mission. So Guido.
Okay, many thanks, Richard. Good morning to everybody. We can go to the next slide, exactly. So my aim here is to present what we are doing in the 4 Green Deal projects which are supporting the climate adaptation mission and which have started in late 2021. The projects will run for 4 years. They are part of, as written here, of the 73 research and innovation projects which are under the Green Deal call. Within this group, on this cluster of projects, there are 3 innovation actions and 1 coordination and support action. And I'm representing the coordination and support action, which is resilience. And I will present a little bit of the work which we have been doing and also what we have developed already and which could be used further. And of course, our aim is to support the mission. So we will particularly focus on the development and testing of tools and methodologies. That's what we primarily have been doing so far, assessing the region's climate risks in all the 22 regions where the projects are working, and then also supporting them to develop the transformative vision, which is and the adaptation pathways, which is a rather challenging topic. Let's go to the next slide. This is the list of the 22 demonstrator regions. As is written on the slides, there are very varied. So there are NUTS 2, NUTS 3, or smaller communities in this list. Some of the regions are covered by several of the projects. And in the projects, we're also looking for additional replication regions. So here we first try to test out and to find out how the solutions can be applied. And then in at least 2 of the projects, we're looking for replication. The regions reflect different climate risks, different biogeographic areas, and will also test different types of solutions. And if you look at this map, and in particular, if you're from any other of the Green Deal projects, I would really like you to reach out to us if your project areas or case study areas are overlapping with ours. I think this is one of the crucial points for making the Green Deal call more impactful. If we could work together, because I mean, we will be doing a lot on climate risk assessment, and especially the stakeholders. I mean, between researchers that can be different, but this can be very tricky if we tell the stakeholders different results from different climate risk assessments, or if we come up with different solutions. They will not understand it. They will distrust more in research, and we consider it's very important to have a better coordination between how we approach the regions on all the different activities we are doing. We are looking how we can do this within the 4 projects, the 4 climate adaptation mission specific projects, but there are many others. For example, I mean, in some of the projects in Sardinia, we deal with agriculture and how it can adapt to climate change in its water use. In Galicia, we deal with mussel fishery. So these are some topics which might also be covered by the other Green Deal projects or further projects which come up now in the next calls. And we believe it's very important to have a common and a coherent approach to the stakeholders for engaging them. And then let's move forward to the next slide. In the next slides, we present briefly what the 4 projects are primarily doing. There's a longer text on each of the slides. I'm not reading it out. No, don't worry. But the slides will be shared afterwards. So we believe that it's useful to provide you with this content, and you always have the link also to the projects, to the project websites. So Transformer, exactly, Charlotte, many thanks for posting it in the chat. Transformer is one of the innovation actions. It's working on the 6 demonstrator regions, which you can see on the right side in the small icons there, and it's I just picked 2 of the key issues which Transformer is developing further forward. One is about data services, and the other one is about demonstrating bankability and innovative financial schemes. And I would also expect that there might be many overlaps with issues which other projects in the Green Deal call are dealing with. And also, I mean, we might have here also some regional representatives where regional representatives might be interested in. And then let's move to the next slide. There's one of the items which Transformer has almost finished. So you can request it to the Transformer team and you can use it. It's a playbook. It's a playbook which helps regions in setting up their way forward to understand the climate risks, to assess them, and then also to develop their pathways. So this 3-step process, which is based on current existing good practices, really compiling how adaptation is working across many areas, how adaptation initiatives are working, what has been tested in practice. And it's a very nice playbook. At the moment, it's a PowerPoint presentation of some 60 slides, and it's really going step by step, providing the templates to work on the ground with this. For example, in Resilience, which is my project, the coordination support action, we have decided already that we will use the playbook from Transformer as a great tool, so we don't have to develop it, and we can rely on the other project which has developed this very useful tool and can further work on it, and then also provide feedback to Transformer on lessons learned when we implement this playbook. Let's move to the next one. This is Arsinoe. Arsinoe is out of these 3 innovation actions, the largest project. It's 41 partners, and they have 9 case studies in Europe. Many of them transboundary case studies, for example, in Lake Ohrid and Lake Prespa, or in the Black Sea, including Turkey, for example. So it's a very challenging project. And one of the aspects which I most like about this project is that it is not coming up right with the solutions from the beginning. So there's a lot about co-creation, how to develop the solutions. And Arsinoe is working with the Climate Innovation Window. The Climate Innovation Window is a product from a previous research project, which has been taken up here. And the solutions which come up, or the discussions between the stakeholders and citizens in the different case studies, they will end up with a formulation of which solutions might be demanded or from the local side, so then not predefined, and then climate innovation window will link innovators with the demanding regions, and as you know, will facilitate this process forward. So I'm really curious and keen to see how well this works. It's I mean, it's a challenge for so many case studies and for so many different topics, but it's a well-developed process to really foster co-design and not start with a solution already in the pipeline. And then on the next slide, we can also see one of the issues which, as you know, has already developed. So exactly, it's the sustain graph. This is a knowledge graph which can help regions, especially those that are more interested in contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals, to the SDGs, to track how they progress towards the SDGs and how they contribute from the many different issues which they work. So you can see all the blue dots here, and they're different areas. There are other, the knowledge graph can be much more complex, and it helps really to track how the different actions a region is undertaking can contribute to the different SDGs and not lose something in the middle because you don't have it on your radar. So it helps really regions to test and to check their contributions. And in this case, also it's using machine learning techniques, so it's based on really state-of-the-art, developing it forward, and it's the basis for participatory modeling and the analysis approaches. So here, this information also contributes to discussion with the stakeholders, with the citizens, to really have them participating in these activities. And then let's move to the next one. This is Impetus. Impetus is the third of the innovation actions. Impetus works in 7 biogeographical regions with 7 case studies. So you can see them on the left side. They were also on the map there at the beginning. And Impetus will develop a very strong tool and data visualizations, difficult word. It will also assess tipping points and risks for climate risk. So these are some elements where Impetus can contribute to other projects and also can integrate the findings which other projects might reach during this process of 4 years where we're working in parallel, maybe in the same regions. And on the next slide, we can see one of the products which Impetus is already putting in place. This is the Resilience Knowledge Booster, and it's a data space to develop climate adaptation pathways, and it uses also intelligent artificial intelligence. So this is developed for each of the regions. This information will be online available, open source, and can be, as I mentioned before, used for other initiatives, and of course, and can and shall and will be used by the regional authorities participating in this project. And then move to the next one. This is about our coordination and support action. So we want to share the most promising solutions, and we of course want to support the communities and the regions across Europe. In addition to what the 3 innovation action projects are doing, we are developing a strong activity in the field of replication. So we want to replicate the solutions which are or the approaches which are being developed in the 3 innovation actions in 10 regions. And we are currently in the process of defining them with a long process where we have exchanged with I think 50 or 60 regions across Europe. And we want to work with those regions which on the one side are most vulnerable to climate risk and also who have a low capacity. I mean, there are regions who do have strong institutions with dedicated people to work on adaptation, and there are others which don't have. And these are the ones which we risk to leave them behind if we don't work with these regions as well. Resilience is developing knowledge tools, and I will show 2 examples later. And we will also work a lot on communication. In the innovation actions, the budget and effort for communication is rather low. But here, I mean, we are for coordination and support action, so we have to support the other 3 projects as well. And we thought that it would be very good to just foster the communication. So the 4 projects have, for example, agreed to have a common newsletter, which is being in the pipeline to be published soon. And I just want to step into two specific examples of tools which we have developed, which are on the next two slides, and then I've finalized. So we have already developed a self-assessment tool to avoid maladaptation. Elena was referring to maladaptation before as one of the critical topics. So we have assessed all the literature. We have checked climate adapt from the European Environmental Agency. We have reviewed literature and carried out expert interviews, and now we have developed a checklist, and this checklist will go into Climate Adapt. It will nurture the adaptation support tool on the agency's, let's say, knowledge hub for climate adaptation. And if you have further interest in this, you can ask us as well. We're very keen to share it in the draft versions we're having at the moment. So we're working now on version 2.0 as it's written on the right side. And the other tool which we are developing, and that's on the next slide, is a list of the financing and funding opportunities which are available at European and national level. We had discussions with some regions. They they know already what is available at the regional level, so they have no interest in that, but they are keen to get further and more detailed information of what is available at the European and national level. And our fact sheets, which we're developing and hopefully will evolve to a database and hopefully integrated into the knowledge platform as well, includes also information about how complex is it to make a proposal, because I mean, we all know that a Horizon Europe proposal is much more complex than a live proposal or just an application for an Interact proposal. So there's something we have also reflected in the fact sheet based on our experience and this work, which is done by our partner in this, led by our partner Federain in this case. And this is the last slide, and I really encourage you to get in contact with us. There's a lot where we believe that we can work together, better work together, and in particular avoid a mess for the stakeholders and the citizens if they have to face at the same time different projects, different researchers approaching them for different surveys. So that's something which we would like to streamline, and we are doing so, at least with the other three projects.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Guido. And you kept very well to time, so that was excellent. So we've now got another chance for Q&A. And there are a range of questions that I've picked up in the chat that I will come to now, and then we'll go to a guiding question, which I hope might raise further thoughts from you. In fact, Beatrice, can you put the guiding question up on screen? And then for those of you who haven't already put anything in the chat, have a think about this question and put some more questions or comments in the chat about it, and I'll come to those very shortly. So things in the chat already. I'd just bring your attention to Jerome Friedrich's information about the Protect project. That sounds very interesting, Jerome, and well worth reading about that and checking it out. There's a link there in the chat. Sebastian Pagliaro, a question for you, Sophie. EU citizens in the UK, can they apply for Horizon funding? Difficult.
That's a toughie because it depends on the latest status of this discussion, and so they can. I know that the UK can be part of consortia, but it depends on the outcome of the negotiations. As I don't know if you might know that at the moment it's a sensitive topic, but the external third party can always be part of that, but not necessarily receive funding.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary, Sophie. It's a mobile situation at the moment still. So yeah.
Sorry.
Perhaps we should be sorry in the UK, but anyway, that's a little controversial. Okay, so then we've got Agata Klimkowska. I'm sure that's not how you pronounce your name, Agata, but wondering about the maladaptation assessment tool, Guido. Can you say anything about that?
I've typed already my email in the chat, so
Oh,
everybody who
brilliant.
wants to get access to the email adaptation tool, I just suggest you write me an email, and it would be good to know why you use it or what you would like to see it do it with it. Me and my colleagues were really very keen to work with more people on this topic. And as Elena said, I really believe there's a strong risk that we invest too much in maladaptation and then will face more challenges later. And it's not something which is, I mean, it often looks like a minor issue, but it's really a major issue as far as we understand.
Yeah, no, I agree. The guiding question. It hasn't led to lots of questions in the chat. I think for us, all of us involved in the Green Deal projects, I think this is a really important question. It's so all this good science going on, how can we ensure that it has greatest impact on the ground in terms of regional and local authorities actually being able to use it to crack on with identifying adaptation pathways and adaptation plans. Guido, might you like to
Of course, I mean,
suggest ways?
I think I have two very clear ways. One is, as I mentioned before, working together. So making more out of the individual projects we are implementing and really teaming up to develop solutions from the, let's say, ecosystem side and the agricultural side and the climate adaptation side, and bringing together the findings, especially if we work in the same region. And then the other point from my side would be just put yourselves in the shoes of the regional managers. I mean, they are very often, and in our project, we have different regional managers participating. They are overstretched. They're working on so many different issues. They can't dedicate to adaptation all the time they have. So think about what would be most useful for them. How can they benefit from the project, and then test it.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you for that. Any other panel members wishing to make any comments on this? We have a response from, is it Nuha El-Tinay? Do you want to open your mic and say a few words, Nuha?
Yes, hi everyone. This is Nuha El-Tinay from ECLAI, the European Secretariat. So regarding the guiding questions you were raising here about how the Green Deal projects can have a greatest impact, I think more emphasis on enhancing evaluation methods of existing projects that have very clear KPIs that is looking into not only the physical impacts of the projects, but also the socioeconomic impacts and how those impact really targets can be measurable and achievable. Because a lot of the emphasis in the presentations were about, for example, stakeholders engagement, but what do we really mean by engagement? Who are we engaging and how? And then how do we really maintain that engagement and make sure that it's more sustainable, I think is a key. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Point very well made. Agatha, you've asked about how can we share the tools and products from different Green Deal projects. There are many, you're quite right. And I think, Guido, would you like to say how they are shared and going to be shared?
I think I don't have the solution to all of this because I mean it's a really, I mean, it's a very important question, and we're developing rather some tools which are very similar. So I think it starts with talking. We had recently with the Transformar project a nice talk. It was initially about maladaptation, and then we moved forward, and then we saw that in our grant agreements we have two very similar deliverables to prepare. And then we have discussed, and we haven't yet finalized it, but we are in discussion whether we want to work jointly on these two deliverables and put them together, which would make a lot of sense. And then each of us could focus on one specific effort or emphasis there. In the climate adaptation cluster, we are starting to prepare an overview of what are the tools we will develop and how they are related. In particular, I mean, in our case, how they are related to the adaptation support tool, which is the guiding principle for adaptation at the Climate Adapt website. And We want to see what are the overlaps, what are the added values, and the contributions we can find between the different tools. And this is something which maybe Richard, the Green Deal Support Office, could also develop further.
Yeah, no, I'll come to you, Sophie, in a second. I was going to say that the Green Deal Project Support Office has a number of working groups. I chair the Climate Change and Biodiversity Working Group. We have 17 Green Deal projects under that working group, including the mission projects. And we've had one meeting really looking to think about the commonalities, the synergies, how we collaborate to best effect. And we've got another meeting coming up in November. I think that that group as a whole, we will figure ways to ensure that together we deliver more than individually. And I think Climate Adapt is will remain always a very important way of actually acting as a repository for all these tools, as an easy one-stop shop, if you like, for all of us. A first point of call when you're trying to find out about things. Sophie.
Yes, I just wanted to compliment on that to say that Climate Adapt has really, the adaptation strategy really wants to make Climate Adapt like one of the central knowledge platform for these kind of things. And this is also the case for the mission adaptation. So my best advice would be to rely on Climate Adapt and try to also amplify the visibility of this platform, because I believe it's quite useful. And on the question, I think also to perhaps complement a little bit what Guido has said is that for the question that is currently on the slide, I think what's really important is about it's about providing solutions, not developing something in the lab, but really test on the ground, really apply and have this dimension really in mind when doing things. Replicability, applications, and this kind of things.
Brilliant. Michael. Oh, we can't hear you, Michael. You're on mute.
Oh, sorry. There's nothing to be added to the very inspiring slides and speeches from Elena, Sophie, and Guido, how to do better, how to get funding, how to align to these programs. I think there's one message I would add on, directly addressing those people responsible in research performing organizations and also in the governments. For instance, negotiating performance agreements with these RPOs. If you want to have more people dealing with impact-oriented research, you need to provide room and also career perspectives for early career researchers going in that direction. So I think here also some homework needs to be done in parallel to all these things having been said a couple of minutes ago.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, I would add my own brief thoughts, which link actually to Elena's slides, and Elena actually was very kind in acknowledging my inputs. But I think, you know, what I would say is it's really important for both policymakers who commission, who fund research, and for the researchers themselves to be clear on the purposes of the research in relation to policy and practice, who it's for and why, and really put a great emphasis on thinking about the findings of the research and what the key messages are in relation to those purposes and those stakeholders, and finding the right means to communicate them in a way that truly engages those people. And there's sort of a link there to what ICLEI, the lady from ICLEI Nuha said.
Richard,
Yes,
my hand's not working.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Go for
but
it.
yeah, no, I think the other thing that I think is very important is we enter into the space that we need to know much better how to adapt. And I think the regions needs your support in providing that evidence, and I definitely subscribe what Guido said, that considering particularly the adaptation doesn't have much funding because it's a public good often, we need to make good choices. And therefore, all the evidence they have based on your research on, even when you don't know, that is also quite important, And I think, as I think it was also Guido and Richard Sophia said, and Michael, we have to reach out to the regions. They have many, many issues of capacity. And I think also Guido raised that the vulnerable regions are the ones that have even more issues of capacity. So they could really benefit with you kind of joining hands with them, answering the questions that they often have, don't have the time or even the mental space to think about, when they're dealing with many other issues. And then remember that adaptation is super transversal. So the social element is going to be critical. I think also for the social scientists that are here, you're also very important in adaptation, because one of the key elements is going to be social transformation, so that these measures can be adopted. So I think, but definitely I think one of the key issues is going to be on the effectiveness of adaptation. Which measures work, which ones don't work. I think that's going to be very important in the coming months, really, because it's really speeding up, as we saw this summer. I mean, I live in Spain, and we had, the predictions go live. For us, we had, a drought, then we had a heat wave, and then we had fires in the space of 3 months. So it's here with us, and I think we need to find, what measures can we take, for example, to restore our forests after a fire? How can we, make all our ecosystems more resilient? These are questions that I think science can really support the regions in addressing.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. There are a couple of other comments in the chat. Thomas Zadrozny asks about, isn't there a need for further integrating actions via the Green Deal Support Office, and why not a Green Deal coordination action in the future? And I think, well, Guido, I would suggest actually Resilience already acts in that way to some degree, does it not?
To some degree, yes, of course. I mean, we're a coordination and support action, but it's in principle only for the 4 climate adaptation projects. So, and as I mentioned before, there are many other projects which talk about ecosystem restoration, agriculture management, forest management, wildfires, which are very strongly related to this. And we should give it a thought to integrate further. I like the proposal, and I think the Green Deal Support Office can do a lot. And maybe that's something which you will have to see. Maybe we should even look beyond a little bit the borders of the Green Deal call, with all the new calls coming up now, or the new projects coming up now.
Yeah, and the Green Deal Support Office Climate Change and Biodiversity Group will do this to some degree. But Sophie.
Yes, I would also like to point out that the mission implementation is there for that as well, to coordinate between the projects and to do a kind of like mega clustering.
Brilliant, thank you. I've got a builder outside making a horrendous noise, so I hope it's not coming through on the mic. Okay, I'm looking at the time. I can see, Agatha, you've made another point, which is fantastic. That you're being so active. I think we're going to have to move on though. So can we move to the next slide, please, Beatrice? And yeah, I'm very pleased to hand over to Michael and the TRAMI project that is seeking to join up everyone across the missions. So Michael.
So many thanks. Good morning to everyone. So what is TRAMI about? Papers from Mazzucato, the interim evaluation, and so-called LAME report on further studies commissioned by the EC concluded that equally with the assessment that policies that address only the rate and not the direction of science and technology are inadequate to tackle the grand transformative challenges. And therefore, these 5 missions have been defined, you see now. And having a look on the mission objectives and the mission implementation plans, we see that the climate adaptation missions seem to have a more or less central position where other missions seem to be linked to it. This already came out when you listened to Sophie's presentation, but also Elena's and Guido's presentation. And on the next slide, you're going to see the mission climate adaptation and some key topics which are in there. And if you press the button for next time, you see the other missions which are very close to the climate adaptation mission. And there are so many cross linkages, even if you look on the mission implementation plans. So risk assessment, nature-based solution, land use and food system, water management, critical infrastructure, health and human health, well-being. On the other side, with the cities mission, local experiments, low carbon, emission-free, or mission water, again dealing with circular economy, renewable energies, carbon-free aquacultures, low greenhouse gas solutions, or the soil mission, reduction of erosion, organ carbon stocks, or the global footprint. And this also came out when you listened to Elena and the examples named beforehand, or when she talked about last summer in Spain. And even in the cancer missions, there are some linkages to the climate adaptation missions. For instance, in the very important and investigated areas of prevention and quality of life. So I would say when we move to the next slide, we come to the trauma project. Why is it there? The TRAMI project is a coordination support action for transnational cooperation on the mission approach. We've learned quite early that the implementation of missions is associated with numerous challenges that responsible actors at the EU level, at the national level, and the regional level are confronted with. Establishing proper governance, so which is of course going beyond the current forms of governance. We have different resources which are not always working together properly at the level of national governments or regional governments. The alignment of factors, the liaising policy domains, and also the coherence of instruments. Part of the instruments which are there at the national level and the regional level, funding instruments, intermediaries, organizations will be engaged in order to implement the European missions, and others will be introduced and developed throughout the next few years. TRAMI does have 25 partners from 16 member countries, member states, and associated states. And most of these partners are innovation and research funding organizations. This is an advantage. So we try to reach out to the countries and regions supported by our partners. And it's a project for 2 years. So we started in springtime, and yeah, we will end up at summer 2024. What we are doing, when you please press the button for another time. So one of the core services is the European Mission Network. Partnerships and cooperation, that's what should be fostered there. And the network should be built on the basis of public and private organizations engaged in the EU mission implementation at each level, national, regional, local level. And another important instrument is mutual learning and exchange of knowledge and experiences. So mutual learning exercises will be organized throughout the next few months. Last week, there was the kickoff of the European Mission Network, and a lot of ideas have been collected in which areas mutual learning exercises should occur. And yeah, in the next few weeks and months, you could learn more about these mutual learning exercises when you visit the TRAMI website. You will see that in the next few, one of the next few slides. Could you press the button for next? Yeah, for another time. Very important for us also is, and this is also a supportive service for the European Commission, but also the regional governments, understanding and mapping actors and instruments. What's already there in our countries and regions, and all this data collected via a mapping exercise with country correspondents, but also a survey which will reach out the next few days, will come in on a knowledge platform. So this will be available publicly for everyone, where you can find information, data, and also contacts. Next slide, please. Yeah, and the question is, so there's a high potential to create better performance and impact through shared learning and coordination across projects, instruments, and missions. And we thought, okay, here we also see opportunities and potential benefits for Green Deal projects, both on the individual level, identifying how their and your research can further the missions. So one hint was the mission implementation plans, but also the presentations held beforehand. And also collaborating with other Green Deal projects, policymakers, and practitioners across the missions. Could you press the button for several times? Yeah. What you could do now, I should have introduced another button where say, please read Elena's and Guido's slides again, or get in contact with Guido. But another thing is get informed and follow the missions and specific CSAs. You might remember Sophie mentioned the launch of the platform next year. So this is also the coordinated support action for the climate adaptation mission. Get in contact with implementation partners via the TRAMI knowledge platform. So you see also www.trami.eu. It's already online, and take also part in TRAMI mutual learning exercises. When you're interested, simply write an email to learning@trami.eu. So for this, our Finnish and Swedish partners are responsible, but all the other partners help out. And Sophie also made us aware of the joint Horizon Europe calls across EU missions, which are also a very interesting opportunity to go ahead in that direction. Next slide, please. So what are the next steps and current steps also of the TRAMI project? We are collecting data and contacts for the moment. Very important exercise is the mapping of actors and instruments relevant for the EU missions at the national and regional levels. So when you get contacted by one of our partners, please be supportive and help us. An understanding of the local and regional situation is very important there, and this data should be available early 2023. There's a survey of mission actors. It's providing us an assessment of the current status of EU missions at national and regional levels, and also discussing the challenges and needs from the perspectives of all respondents, also being available at the end of 2022. And of course, very important for us, the mutual learning events. So if you're interested, please write an email to learning@trami.eu. Many thanks so far.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Michael. That was great. Now, final Q&A. We've got another guiding question. If you move on to the next slide. At first glance, it might look like the last guiding question, but actually this one is about how can the projects have greatest impact across the EU missions. And here we're not just thinking about the 4 mission projects, the 4 adaptation focused projects. We're thinking about the 73 Green Deal projects and how can they have greatest impact on consideration and implementation of adaptation to climate change across the EU missions. Elena has made the case that whether we know it or not, we're all working on climate adaptation. It's such a cross-cutting need that it's pervasive of all that we do. So put your questions in the chat or responses in the chat about that guiding question. And for now, I'll just look at the questions that we've got, which are more general. Sebastiano Pagliaro, again, he's asking, does someone know if there is a specific website link where EU citizens that are based outside the EU can find funding opportunities for their startups? Gosh, does anybody have any thoughts on that? I'm looking very unfairly to you, Sophie.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to disappoint you because I've only been working for the Commission for a few months. So
yeah, no, I think it's Sebastiano, I think it's a tough question, and one that I think you're going to have to research yourself. But if anyone does have any advice for Sebastiano, I'm sure he'd welcome you contacting him.
I think
Michael.
there's no correct answer because this is very specific, this question. So EU citizens based outside the EU is a complicated matter, which doesn't tell us at which stage are these projects, or is it already a firm? So this makes a big difference for the Commission. But I think many European incubators and also universities fostering academic spin-offs are not working in an isolated way and a more international and global way nowadays. So I think among the EBN network, European Business Network, there are several incubators and startup supporting organizations, and some of them are really outside oriented and are really happy to invite projects from other European countries, but also non-European countries to their incubators. And then, of course, you're eligible for European funding maybe as well. I just can't tell you more about the German or Austrian situation as I'm an Austrian, but maybe I should keep the general link there.
Okay, that's thank you. That was very helpful and supportive. Eleanor, somebody's asking, it's Agatha, asking how they can reach out to you directly. I suggest you either put your email in the chat, or we can give you, I think we can give you Agatha's email address. Agatha, is that okay with you if we give Eleanor your email address? You can just say yes in the chat. Okay, so this guiding question. Thoughts on how the Green Deal projects can have greatest impact across the missions. Michael, is it unfair to start with you, given your TRAMI? Have you thoughts on this?
Yeah, TRAMI is by definition a project organized across missions, and I think this is also a good thing. We are a partner for national and regional governments, but also RPOs, research performing organizations, which are interested in the missions. And we think that this learning how to get started there and the examples provided by Elena have already been inspiring, really could be used and can be helpful across missions. And many of these topics are common topics, as you say. You could put it in a soil mission, or you could also put it in the water or the climate adaptation mission. At the level of regional and or local governments, or these policy areas, is not so relevant for which mission we are working. They want to have solutions, they have problems. So I think we will face a lot of larger efforts where both several missions are treated and brought forward. And that, therefore, I think the most important thing what to be considered is what Elena said. You need to talk with the farmers, you need to go to the fishermen, you need to talk with the mayors, you need to get in contact with these people, for instance, via the the European Mission Network, but also this very helpful project as being presented by Guido. And of course, we need to change our research cultures. We know some of of the people in the call now are from funding bodies, for instance, and of course, always transdisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity is always a challenge which needs to be considered by evaluation and assessment systems. So I think here also a lot of movement is needed, and as we know, much of the implementation of the EU missions needs to be funded at the national and regional or local level as well. So it doesn't help if the European Commission is solely going that direction. This needs to also be taken up at the local and regional levels.
Thank you, Michael. That was great. Guido, sorry, I caught you off guard, but Guido, have you thoughts?
I mean, my thoughts would be the same ones as I was mentioning before within the mission. I mean, there are many other projects which, I mean, climate adaptation projects should be linked to health projects. I mean, there are many links, and I really believe that there could be proper links established between the projects, at least under the Green Deal. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think Michael's slide, which shows the links between the missions, I think of the adaptation mission as, in some ways, almost something of an umbrella mission to at least three of the others, and you've shown links actually, Michael, to cancer as well. I mean, that's looking at it very biased from somebody whose life is about climate adaptation. But then my belief is all our lives need to be about climate adaptation. Elena.
Richard, I would say that the other missions are also sure that they are umbrella to the others. So
I'm sure you're right too. But that's an opportunity for all of us. Yeah, an opportunity to create those links. So, Elena, have you got thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, it's really good news to see, you know, the work kind of facilitated by TRAMI, because I think there's so many synergies that are critical to be built between the missions. For example, thinking of the soil mission, I mean, if we think of one of the most vulnerable sectors is agriculture, and also so many expectations are kind of held in relation to, for example, you know, kind of carbon farming. And yet I think really scientists need to tell us, you know, how realistic are those expectations? And I think the soil mission can really, really help, for example, in this context to make, you know, a vulnerable community and a vulnerable sector, they're going to be on the front line of climate impacts. So the soil mission is going to be very, very important in this respect. But for example, when you think about cities, again, and the mission on cities, the 100, cities have been already chosen. They're really very active. I mean, I spent the last weekend with some of them, the Spanish ones, and it's really interesting because the cities themselves already see that they have to adapt because they are the front line of the impacts. Again, the cities are being flooded. They had heat waves this summer where the elderly were really vulnerable and were really, exposed, or even the kind of children, infants, where, for example, schools in Spain opening in July, with the, with situation where children cannot go to school. So again, that links to health. So, and I do like also what I saw, the philosophy of I haven't really thought about the cancer mission, but this philosophy of prevention, I think, is super important to be kind of, if it imbues all the missions, I think that would be very good kind of cross-fertilization between the projects. Of course, the water, what can I say? I mean, coastal areas, also the oceans at the moment are kind of giving us a blank check in terms of absorbing so much heat, but at some point, that might not be the case. And we also have very important habitats, coastal and marine habitats, which again are going to be very important for adaptation. So I think, to me, this idea that they have to link up is absolutely fundamental. And science, as Thomas was saying, this idea that we have to not just be interdisciplinary, but increasingly transdisciplinary, because these are complex problems. So we have to be able to work across disciplines together to understand these complex problems and come up with effective adaptation solutions. So,
yeah,
yes.
that's great. I'll come to Michael in a second. I mean,
Yeah.
Agata makes the point that there's all the thinking actually across the adaptation mitigation nexus, which you've touched upon, Elena. There's a lot of talk, as Agata says, about the opportunities to use nature-based solutions for mitigation, and there are the links with adaptation that are profound. So that creates, I think, links between both the adaptation mission and the soils mission in particular. Michael.
Yeah, and I think we will need to bring forward also our instruments from various perspectives. So Guido was talking about systemic intervention, and this includes, of course, the researchers, how to better think, how to bring down, not just exploit in that sense that we do have more dissemination and the one or the other patent, or as we know, or a new project, but also really come up with solutions directly talking with the user side, with the including the citizen side, or the governments and regulations. So real laboratories, for instance, this is something a real challenge in many countries and regions. And when you have a prototype implemented for the climate in the context of the climate adaptation mission or in another mission, this is helpful for all the other missions as well. So innovation in the regulatory system is here important. And another thing is, and the Commission already started with that thinking a couple of years ago, we do have also technical progress. So digitization. When it did some analysis and talked about what are the real opportunities for missions in many areas, this is data collection, data exchange. So here we really need to bring forward our technical opportunities, and at that basis or that level also a lot of opportunities could be found to collaborate across the missions. So the missions, the data gathered, for instance, by sensors in the soil, can be used by other people. And I don't bring up too many examples. Technicians could be better there. But I think here we do have also a lot of cross linkages among the missions and the projects there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very important point, Michael. Sophie.
A lot has been said already, but I just wanted to reassure you also that this is what the missions are really about, breaking silos. And this is really with the mission, what the Commission is trying to do is break silos between the disciplines, between the sectors, but also internally between the different departments, units, and everything. And so I just wanted to reassure you that we are trying to work as closely as we can together with our colleagues from other missions to for instance, we have joint calls trying to address different aspects of different missions and these kind of things. And also in the way the missions are being set up is that even though Horizon Europe is very much research and innovation program, as I said, like in the Secretariat of the Adaptation Mission, for instance, we are working very closely together with colleagues from the Climate Action, so more of a policy DG. And so this is really the concept of the mission. I just wanted to point it out.
Yeah, that's brilliant, and it's a great way to close the question, actually. So thank you for that, Sophie. So let's move to the final slides, Beatrice, and the next slide. Yes, it's another Mentimeter. How do you want to do this, Beatrice?
Matt, if you are in the call, could you show the Menti slide by sharing your screen, as Hamna did the previous time?
Yep, I can do that.
And Sophie has very kindly put the link to Menti again in the chat, and hopefully you've still got that open, actually. But could somebody also post the code to the Menti poll in the chat, please?
So there have been some answers already inputted.
Okay.
So there are some things we can already start with, and then maybe give people a bit of time to add anything more, maybe.
Okay, that's great. So yes, this is an opportunity just to provide a very brief answer to the question: how might you as an individual, your organisation, help to deliver the mission on climate adaptation? Just an opportunity to try and inspire one another. Fewer words would be better because they'll fit on screen easier. So, you know, just 3 or 4 words would be great. Matt, how will they show on screen, or is the screen now full?
They should, if there are more added, then
yes. Okay.
Saying that it says there's 11 contributions and only 8 are showing.
Yes.
I can have a look.
Thank you. Perhaps reset results, which is over on the left-hand side.
Left-hand side over here, is it?
No, left-hand side. Oh, there we go. Yes, that one. The middle one. You were on it. There it is. Yep. You're there. That one. Yep.
Okay, give that a go.
Go for it.
So this will, if I do this though, it will take off what people have put.
Oh, will it? It won't provide the new. Oh, okay. I was hoping it would provide the new answers.
No.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. We can.
There we go. Brilliant. Thank you.
Excellent.
Let's have a chance just to read briefly.
Just let me know when you want me to.
So there's quite a lot here about communication and knowledge sharing, stuff about bringing innovation faster to the market. Yes, scroll up slightly as well. That's it. Stop there. Yeah. Yes, a lot of this, I mean, it's interesting, a lot of this is about communication and knowledge sharing and information exchange. So, which is great, really profoundly important, and is what will create the glue, will create the opportunity for the sum of the, whatever, I always get this the wrong way around. The sum of the parts is greater than whole, or the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I can't remember, but you know what I mean. Okay, that's great. Thank you for doing that. I hope you've had a chance to just read. Yeah. There is a plea there at the bottom, I see, which none of us can ignore, which is countries must reduce their emissions. Yes, they must reduce their emissions. We are heading into dangerous climate change. But because we're heading into dangerous climate change, we must also adapt. And as the Paris Agreement makes clear, those both climate mitigation and climate adaptation are now both urgent priorities. So let's move to the next slide, please, Beatrice, and we'll try to finish in a minute or two, because I see we're now overrunning just slightly. Thank you. Can you go to your? Thank you. So next steps, I said early on, for those regional and local authorities who might be online, you've got until the 25th of November if you haven't yet signed the mission and joined it and wish to do so. I hope you will. The mission implementation platform will be launched in early 2023, which is really exciting. And perhaps, Sophie, you've mentioned it actually once or twice, but is there anything you could say about the mission implementation platform?
Yes, so as a reminder, the mission implementation platform will be kind of like very central to the mission. It will act as a connector between the projects and the different regions, and it will also offer technical assistance to the regions. And for the project side, if the projects are labeled as mission project, which is still under discussion on how it goes. At the moment, we have the 4 Green Deal presented, the Green Deal project presented by Guido, but we will also have the mission project and others that are very relevant. The total amount depends on the contractor of the mission implementation, but there it will also act as a coordinator between the different projects.
Brilliant. No, I mean, and that will, I hope, answer actually a lot of the questions about how do we move forward in a joined up way, in a way that really helps the research to link to policy and practice on the ground. There'll be further Green Deal Project Support Office webinars like this one next year, starting early next year. We'll have a whole series of them. So do please join other ones if you found today's enjoyable and informative. We'll email the slide deck to all of you and a link to the recording and a short feedback survey. I know feedback surveys can be a bit irritating, but this one really is short, and it would be really helpful to us if you could just complete it. It'll only take 2 or 3 minutes. The shortest responses are helpful, even just ticks in tick boxes. So please do that. Okay, well, we're overrunning just slightly, and I'm sure you've got meetings to go to. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly learned a lot from the panel, and I hope you have too. So thank you.
Many thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
And thanks
Thank you
for
very
all
much,
participating.
Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Sophia. Thank you, Michael.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very
Bye.
much, Michael.